Hey guys, so today I'm going to review with you the communication process. And this is very important for our class because it is the foundation of why we communicate to other people. So we're going to take this slow and we're going to make sure we understand how one person speaks to another and how the process works in our brains, right? So we have the communication process. So the person that's right here, this picture, is someone speaking. So this is the sender. So we have someone that is referred to as the sender, and then we have someone who is referred to as the receiver. So when the sender is talking, okay, they're talking to the other person, they could do that in a lot of different ways. So the first part is that we have the person who's speaking, and as they speak, they are encoding. That means that they're giving a message of some sort. So to encode is to give a message. So here's our message. This is called the message channel. So the message channel is that we can deliver messages through text messages. We could deliver that message through making a phone call and talking to someone. We could do that through writing something. And so when we sit and we try to communicate with others, we know that there's lots of different ways to actually have a message, right? So it could be verbal and nonverbal, which means you can say it or you can write it. So that's why we need to make sure we understand that communication is not just talking. It also can be your thoughts being given to someone else through writing or talking to them through a phone call or writing a text message. And so when they decide to make this message, sometimes this red circle that you see right here, okay, this red circle, it means that sometimes there may be something called noise. And when we have noise, it's very hard to concentrate. So noise looks a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So here's the sender, and the sender decides to speak. How they're going to go through and give a message could be through the text message, through the actual phone call, or could be in writing. They might have to deal with some noise in that, right? But then the message gets to the receiver. And so here's the person receiving the message, no matter how it's given to them. Once that information from the encoding, taking the message, putting it in the way that they're going to give the message, then the decoding happens. And so all these cogs in your brain, they start working, and then you are able to figure out how to decode, right? So you're going to break down the message in your mind. So when that happens, you are then going to understand the message that was given from the receiver, okay? Sometimes when you don't understand, then you could get feedback. Notice how these arrows go back and forth, back and forth. That's because I'm able to, as a receiver, ask questions to the sender, and we go back and forth and back and forth, okay? So it's important that you understand that. So communications involves at least two people, the sender of the message and the receiver. Here's the sender. Notice how they're giving a message. The receiver is not speaking. The receiver is processing the message. So when the receiver is speaking, just like I just said, they are encoding what they're saying into a message, written, text message, or maybe making a phone call, right? So these are the encoding process. So here is the sender, and they're deciding how they're going to give that information. So to communicate, the sender encodes their message by talking about it, and they are thinking, how can I give a picture to this person to help them understand what they're speaking about? Then the message is presented through a channel, which may be speaking, it may be talking, it may be texting, or it could be actually writing, right? So that's what the sender decides. How am I going to give the message? Now we're talking about the receiver, okay? Because remember, sender, receiver. So the receiver actually is going to take the message, right? So they take this message that was being sent to them, and now they have to use their brain, and their brain is going to decide, okay, what is this message and how can I respond to it? And sometimes this is the part that's a little challenging for some of us. It takes us a little extra time to break it down and understand, and that's okay. Everybody works on their own pace, right? So the message is being sent, and when it is sent, our brains decode the message. Decoding takes place in the receiver's brain, which is the receiver, okay? So to properly receive the message, the receiver has to decode by listening to the words and thinking about them and turning those words that they're saying into an image in their head. And when they get the verbal from someone telling them that message, then they start to picture things in their head, and then they can respond. After receiving the initial message and processing it, the receiver may choose to continue the communication through feedback. So that means when the receiver is like, let me try and think about that. And then they realize that, feedback, right? Let me ask questions. So they're going to ask questions back to the speaker. Then that speaker is going to say the answer to the question to help this person understand. And it goes back and forth. So feedback is the word that we're looking at. Okay, feedback. They get to get more input in their minds so that they know what's happening. Now, everything you see here in the red circle, right? We know that when the message is trying to get sent, sometimes we have noise. Noise is anything that disrupts the communication between the two of them. So maybe the radio's playing. Maybe they're playing video games instead of focusing on what message the teacher's saying, like in a Zoom call. Maybe somebody around you is talking too much, and so you can't focus on what's being said. All of those things could be noise, right? That could be noise for their brains. So that's pretty much it for today. We're just looking at the communication process. You have the sender, and then you have the receiver. And then in between is a message being sent to them, right? Sometimes noise makes it hard for people to understand. And then you have the encoding. When the person's speaking, they're encoding into their message on how they're going to communicate that message. And once that information is sent to the receiver is decoding what was being sent to them, okay? And then once they have that information, they go back and forth. Feedback, back and forth, so that they can finally understand what was being given to them. And that, my dear sweet children, is the communication process, okay? So what we're going to do is just practice looking at this for the next couple of days, and then we will keep practicing with these words throughout the rest of this 9 weeks because they're super important to our class.